When should you set up an LLC for your rental property? My name is Andrew Ayers. I'm an estate planning and business law attorney with offices in Edina, Minnesota and New York City. And today we're going to talk about a timing issue that you're going to deal with when you're putting a rental property into an LLC. It's going to be very important that before you take that step, you understand the timing involved and you need to make sure that you've got it correct, or else you could be doing a bunch of work that isn't going to get to the ends that you're looking for. So the reason timing is so important on this issue is because you may not be allowed to just transfer your rental property into an LLC. There are other parties involved that have an interest in this, and you need to make sure that they understand what's going on and that they're giving you their permission. So we're going to look at two different scenarios today. The first one is if you already own the property and you now want to move it from your name into an LLC. And the second scenario will be if you're buying the property, you don't own it yet, and you want to put the property into the LLC. So back to our first scenario. Let's say you own a rental property already, it's in your name, you've been managing it, and let's say you've had a tenant for a couple of years, and now you want to put it into an LLC. You want to protect your personal assets, you want that liability protection that the LLC can provide you. If you don't have a lender on the property, if it's completely paid off and all you're doing is paying your property taxes, then you can go ahead and move that in the LLC. The rest of this video really isn't going to concern you, because this is really concerning when you have a lender, someone who's giving you a mortgage on the property. In that situation, if you want to move the property into an LLC, you need to get the lender's permission first. The reason is if you don't have permission, you could be creating a big problem for you. So what I always recommend is that if you own that property already and you'd like to move that property into an LLC, your first step is to contact your lender. If you're working with a servicing company that holds a bunch of different mortgages, they may not even allow you to move that property into the LLC. They may say, sorry, we won't consent to it. And then your options are either to refinance the mortgage or find a different path to move that property. One path you could then look at would be to create a trust and move the property into a trust. The reason this permission is important is because if you look at the fine print of most mortgages, if you just go ahead and move the property into the LLC without the permission of your mortgage lender, you can accelerate the mortgage, meaning that you now have to pay the entire amount due on the mortgage. And unless you have that money lying around, that's going to be a big liability for you to suddenly have to pay. It's going to create a lot of paperwork, and then you may be running around to find a new way to refinance that mortgage. And if you do it that way, and then you can't pay off that accelerated mortgage, what are you going to do with the property? You now have the property in the LLC and you have to pay off that mortgage. The other problem with just creating the LLC and not getting permission is if you create that LLC and then try to get the permission later and they say no, then you've created an LLC, but it can't own the property. So what are you going to do with that LLC? Obviously, I'm a proponent of LLCs in a lot of different situations, and you may be able to then down the road use the LLC for a different purpose, but it seems like kind of a waste of your time and money to create an LLC that then can't own that property. So the second scenario we're going to look at is if you're buying the property fresh. So if you're buying the property, you don't own it yet, and you intend to put it into an LLC because you're going to use it as a rental property, or even if you're not, you just want to put it in the LLC for liability protection and privacy purposes. Before you enter the purchase, talk to the lender, if there's a lender, about your plans to move it in the LLC. You want to make sure, just like with the other scenario, that they agree that the property can be put in the LLC. One advantage of this scenario is that you don't have to do any deed work after the property is purchased to put it in the LLC. With the right work with the lender, when you actually sign the paperwork at the real estate closing, the property will go directly into the LLC and you don't have to then do a deed later. So in our first scenario, if you already own the property and you're moving it into an LLC, you have to create a deed for the property, a new deed that transfers title. But if you're doing it all in one closing, then you don't need to do that second deed. The other advantage in this respect is that you can create that LLC when you have permission before the closing. So we want to make sure that LLC is set up, ready to go. You want it filed with the state. You want your operating agreement in place. You want to make sure you have an EIN, and you want to have a business bank account. You want to have all these things ready to go for your LLC if you're going to purchase the property directly into an LLC. Now, clients, when they come to me asking these timing questions, they're very concerned because they may have jumped in the process at the wrong time. So last week I dealt with a client who came to me and said, What happened was they went to a website and they formed an LLC on the website. Now, they overpaid on the filing fees because the website doesn't tell you that they're marking up their fees for your filing. But they got the websites to file their LLC for them. They downloaded the operating agreement that the website gave them. That's, of course, missing a bunch of different provisions. But they signed the agreement. They went to the IRS. They got an EIN. They went to the bank. They got a bank account. And then when they went to transfer the property, they found out that the mortgage company said, we're not going to allow it. Because under the terms of the mortgage, they didn't have enough payment history. They wouldn't consent to that LLC being moved, that property being moved into the LLC. So now that client is stuck with an LLC they created. They spent more money than they needed to by using this online website. It's got a business bank account, it's got a tax ID number, and now it's an LLC they can't really use. Now they may be able to find something else to use it for, or they're going to now have to find a way to voluntarily dissolve the LLC, which means they're back in my office again just to go through the paperwork to make sure we're properly dissolving the LLC. You don't want to end up in that scenario. Not that lawyers don't want to help you and we don't want to clean up the messes, but the reality is that's a bunch of money spent by that client that they didn't need to spend. It could have been answered with a simple phone call to their mortgage lender, and who would have said that no, we're not going to give you that permission, and then they could speak to an attorney about other alternatives for how to put that rental property into perhaps a trust to protect it for liability purposes. So hopefully you can see from these scenarios, this isn't something I recommend you do yourself. The one thing you're going to do yourself is you're going to call your mortgage lender and make sure that you've got permission. But once that is done, you want to work with professionals. Work with an attorney, work with your accountant, work with your business advisors to make sure that you know the process and get that LLC set up correctly. If you're ready to get started, you can go to my website, andrewmayers.com. There's a red legal strategy session button on the main page. You'll be taken to my personal calendar, and we can set up a 15 or 20-minute phone call to go through where you are in the process. Make sure you're asking the right questions of the right people. So, for example, one thing that people often ask the mortgage lender is, can I transfer the mortgage to the LLC's name? That's not actually the question you want to ask. The question you want to ask is, can I transfer title to the property into the LLC? The answer to those two questions can be very different. So work with a professional to make sure you're getting the right questions asked and answered so that you can move your rental property into an LLC at the right time.